Okay, so the first thing I wanted to go through was this question one. This was the one that you guys took over the weekend. So this is the first mock AP exam. So question one, it had a two-way table with categorical data about two advertisements and that were sent out, and then whether the people clicked on them, clicked but didn't purchase, and then clicked and made the purchase. So here are the answers for A through C. I hope you guys have had a chance to look through the solutions. But if not, please correct them on your paper, or you could also print this out to have in your AP binder. I don't mind if you print it out because there's nothing wrong with that. But part A, it's an observational because there was no treatment. There was nothing that we were making them do. So there was no experiment involved. We were just sitting back and watching them as they either clicked or didn't click and recording the data. For part B, it was a little interesting because it said provide one piece of evidence. And usually what that means when it says evidence is it's looking for mathematical evidence as to why one is more effective than the other. So for the solutions for this, it would have been best to compare the proportions. So advertisement one had a higher proportion that made a purchase than advertisement two. So that's how we can prove that it was more effective, because more people bought ad one than ad two. And then a reason why advertisement two was more effective could be that more people clicked on advertisement two than advertisement one. Yes.
For number one, did you say it was an observational study or an experiment?
I think I said observational study, but I meant experiment. I don't know why I
Oh,
said that. It
wait,
should
can you
be,
explain
I
that
guess I
again?
didn't read the problem. It was that they were assigned, so the treatments were assigned. The advertisements were assigned to the people.
Even though like the people didn't volunteer.
Right. It didn't have to be volunteers for an experiment. As long as you
Okay.
see the word random assigned. I guess I misread that. I'm sorry. I thought they
Okay.
were it was just random selection and we observed it, but it looks like from the prompt they were randomly assigned.
Okay.
So
Thank
if you
you.
see the word random assignment, that is like the word assignment is kind of your key of
Okay.
like that means experiment. So
Thank you.
the word assignment, that equals experiment. Also on part B, if you just said more people but you didn't say proportion, then I know that the sample size is the same for both ads, but they still want you to talk about relative frequency versus just frequency. So the word proportion is really important because, for instance, if the two sample sizes were different, then just because you have one is more than the other, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's higher. So the word proportion and finding the relative frequency was important for that. And then for part C, they wanted you to prove whether it was independent or not. So are the events advertisement one and made purchase independent? And it wants you to do that mathematically. So, and that actually showed up in both mock exams, and which is interesting to me because I'm just wondering if it's going to actually be on the AP exam because of that. But in this one, the multiplication rule would have been acceptable. So you could have done like, so to do the multiplication rule states that the two events are independent if their intersections equal each other. So probability of A times the probability of B equals the probability of A and B. Which I know on this answer key, it shows the conditional rule, but I want to show you the multiplication rule too, just to have in your back pocket, because I think personally that one's a little bit easier. So the one that's on the answer key is the conditional one, but I'm going to also show you the multiplication rule, which would have worked in this case. So if I'm looking at the probability of A, which is the probability of advertisement 1, then advertisement 1 is 100 out of 200. So 50% are advertisement 1. The probability of making a purchase is going to be 38 out of 200. So that's the probability of making a purchase. And then if they were independent, then this would be a true statement of, it already gives me the intersection of making a purchase and advertisement 1, which is 22 out of 200. So if you actually put these in your calculator and multiplied, you would end up finding out that they don't equal each other. I don't have my calculator next to me, but you would end up seeing that the left side of the equal sign does not equal the right side. So that also mathematically proves this is just the multiplication rule. Same reasoning, but mathematically the multiplication rule, they are not independent either. So you could have done either one for this scenario. On the mock exam, you what?
Is there ever a time that the multiplication rule doesn't work?
Well, we'll look on mock exam 2. The question said based on parts B and C. Do you remember that on the one you took yesterday?
Yeah.
It was like based on parts B and C, so you had to use the conditional rule for that one. But personally, I prefer this one better. I think it just makes more sense. Then for parts D and E, it goes into a 2-sample hypothesis test with proportions. And for part D, it said one of the conditions is checking the n times p hat c, n times 1 minus p hat c, which I found interesting because normally on a 2-sample, we check n p hat 1, n p hat 2, and 1, we do 4 of them. And if they do ask you to do the conditions on the AP test, I would just stick with doing all 4 of them. I don't know if they'll ask you to check conditions or not, but I think that the reason why they did it this way is just because that is another option too, is doing n p hat c. But we do it with all 4, p hat 1, p hat 2, p hat 1 minus p hat 1, 1 minus p hat 2. But the question is, why do we check this condition? Like, what is the reason behind checking this large sample condition? And the reason why is so that we can tell whether the sampling distribution is normal or not. And then we can then go from there and calculate a test statistic and a p-value. So the reason why we check these conditions is because we're looking to see if it's a normal sampling distribution and then move forward with the calculations. And there are predictions that they think there's going to be a question like that. Like, why do we check conditions? Because they know you have the notes in front of you. So it's like, of course, we can ask you to check conditions all day and everybody's going to get that right. But do you know why we do it? So I would maybe star that one. Part E was interpreting the p-value. And I made a script for that. But assuming the null is true, probability of this or something more extreme. Which also on this one, it was a 2-tailed test. If you just stuck with or more extreme, that would be fine. They did like 0.06 or greater, negative 0.06 or less. But if you said more extreme, that's okay too.
How do you tell if it's a 1-tail or a 2-tail again?
It gave it to us in the problem.
Oh.
A not equal to test.
Got it. Thank you.
And then based on the p-value, what should your conclusion be? I don't think it gave you an alpha, but if it doesn't, you assume 0.05, and this value is greater than that, so we fail to reject, not convincing evidence, etc.
Ms. McKinley,
Uh-huh.
on that question, can you explain again how you got 0.06?
0.06 is the test statistic. Which would be the difference between the 2 proportions.
Thank you.
So they just calculated that by, it was the mean of the sampling distribution, which would be your two populations subtracted. Okay, so question 2. Remember, the prediction is 1 is about proportions, 1's about means. 1's going to be 2 sample, 1's going to be 1 sample. So this is a 1 sample means question. Part A, it was asking you to find the z-score. I think you also could have done a normal CDF with this as well. And remember me talking about if you do a normal CDF with a question like this, it gives me all of the parameters. But if all you do is say normal CDF 5.5 or negative infinity 5.5, 8, 2.5. And that's all you put, and you don't put any other context or anything else, you're not going to get credit for it. You're not going to get full credit. So it's okay to put the calculator function in your answer. That's totally fine. But somewhere on your answer, you need to define your parameters. So you could say, I'm just going to erase what they did. So if you did the calculator stuff, somewhere you need to say normal mean equals 8, standard deviation equals 2.5. And that's defining your parameters. You give them the shape, the mean, and the standard deviation. Then you can put this stuff. Just somewhere you need to define what these numbers symbolize. You could even put it underneath mu and sigma. But you have to define what each one means, because if you're just putting it in as a calculator function, they don't know if you know what the mean and the standard deviation are. Part B, it wanted you to cuss. So range, median, shape was skewed right. I could also see it being bimodal. I'm sure they would have taken that as well if you said bimodal. And then part C, it wanted you to find the point estimate and margin of error. So that's just vocab for the confidence interval. Point estimate is your center. The center point would have been 6.3. And the margin of error, that's half of your range. So you could have subtracted the 7 minus 5.6, divided that by 2. Based on the confidence interval, does the park ranger have convincing evidence that it's different than 8 inches? And you're looking for 8 inside your interval. So 8 is not contained in there. 8 is not contained in the interval, so the park ranger has convincing evidence that the mean does not equal 8. And I made a little script page for you guys, so I put that in there as well. And then the last question is propose a sampling method. I think that they asked for, I don't know if they asked for a stratified in this. Just choosing one and then giving a reason as to why it's the best. Stratified is usually the best because you're getting some from all of them, which means you have less variability. So if it asks you to choose a sampling method, stratified is usually the best. And your reason behind that is that there's less variability. If stratified doesn't make sense and they're doing it by location, I think one of the tests we did, it was talking about cluster sampling. You kind of just have to use your judgment for that. But
Can you explain how they got the z-score for the first one?
it's the value minus the mean over the standard deviation. But we normally do it by using normal CDF. Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. It's the same. What they did is, because I got this from the AP website, so they do it the long way where they find the z-score and then use the table, but we don't use the table, so just the calculator is fine as long as you put the parameters somewhere out to the side.
All right, thank you.
Okay, here are the solutions for the one that you guys took on Monday. I don't have the questions next to it. I have them right here, but they're not directly next to it. So this is for the first page. And question D is the one where they said based on your answer from part B and C. So based on B and C. So what that means is if it didn't say that, we could have definitely used the independence rule, or the multiplication rule for independence, but since it said based on B and C, that means we had to use those answers somewhere. So if the question number says based on previous part, you have to use that in your answer. Otherwise, you won't get any points. So part B is the probability of getting the flu. Part C is the probability of getting the flu given they took vitamin C. And if these two were equal to each other, then that would mean that they're independent. That's the conditional rule for independence. But since these two numbers are not the same, then they are not independent. Part E, it wanted you to decide what type of test would be best. So a 2-sample, 2-prop z-test. And if you did write them, they put the parameters in the subscripts. Normally we're used to seeing it like this, where P1 equals the true proportion of blah, blah, blah. P2, same kind of thing. That's normally how we're used to writing it. So if you put it that way, that's great. In fact, I almost prefer it that way just because sometimes it scares me to have just this little information, placebo and vitamin C there. I guess they did define it here, so that's okay. And then for F, it gave you a p-value and asked what decision you would make. So we would reject because it's so small and conclude that there is the placebo is greater than vitamin C. So did you guys have any other questions from this problem? Okay, and I've posted the solutions too if you guys want to print them or write them down. So this was question 2. Let me look at it really quickly just to get some reference. Oh, it's not there. Oh, interesting. So for part B, it wanted you to give the definition of a standard deviation or the script for it. It's your average distance between the two groups, so between the mean and the control group. But standard deviation is always just your average distance from the mean, your deviation from the mean. Then for part D, I wanted you to find the, or do the conditions. The random condition, they were randomly assigned. And then for n is greater than 30, we don't have a sample size greater than 30, but there's not a strong skewness or outliers in the graph. So the condition is met, because remember, you can either have greater than 30 or you can graph it. If you didn't even talk about n is greater than 30, then that was okay, as long as you mentioned the graph. And then the third one, you also could have put sigma is unknown. I still like putting that. I don't know if they grade it or not, but I still like to put it. And then one that I've been noticing that they're using for means too is just checking that your sample is less than 10% of your population. I don't know if they check it. I know that we do it on the proportion one mostly, but I guess it wouldn't hurt to have it on the means too. I've just been noticing that some of the answer keys have been putting it on there. And then E, the question was, is there significant evidence of a difference? And 0 is not contained in my 95% confidence interval. So we can conclude that there is a significant difference. Also, whenever you have a question like this, it does help, and they may not ask it, but it does help to indicate which direction if you don't have 0 in your interval. So for instance, the entire confidence interval is positive. So that would mean that it's greater than 0, like one is higher than the other. So sometimes giving the direction is good too, if 0 is not contained. So since they're all positive, that indicates higher or greater. So did you guys have questions from this for your response?
On part D, I talked about how the N was only like it was 25, not 30, but I just basically said that like it didn't affect the distribution, so it was like okay to use it still. Does that count?
I think you needed to mention the graph not having outliers
Okay.
or skewness, because whenever we graph stuff for means, we always look for, is it approximately symmetrical, and it doesn't have any outliers. So you mentioned the graph, but you didn't fully, that probably would have just been a partial, but saying that like you need to mention the graph and describe why the graph is good, even though we don't have the sample size. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do today is just go through, I'm gonna bring this over.
Secondly,
Uh-huh.
for the conditions, they have everything like explained out in sentences. Do we have to do that?
No.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't know if they're even going to ask us to do conditions, but if you do the conditions like we've always done, these answers are like perfect answers. And I'm sure things that you put would still be full credit. It's just they're not like, whenever you read the AP solutions, there's always so much. Those are like the perfect answers. That's how these are too. But
Okay.
I'm sure that you would have enough.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the last thing I want to do today is go through just some tips and then submitting your answers and things like that. And then we will meet like Friday of the AP test in the morning just for a few minutes just to kind of go through this information. Let's see. There we'll go. Okay, the first thing, these are just tips for the actual AP exam. So you clearly want to communicate your understanding using formulas, calculations, or words. A correct answer with no work will not give you any credit. We've seen that a lot of times. Even if it's a simple addition problem for probability or something, you always want to show your work. It's like 2 + 2. Write what you need and then be done. Don't try to over explain, because if you say something that's correct and then you say something that's incorrect after that because you just kept talking, they'll actually count the whole thing wrong. Always include context in your answers. So describe the distribution. Remember, you always refer back to the original problem. Don't ever use the word it. So don't say it is normal. That's what I see all the time. It's not it is normal. You would say the sampling distribution is normal. That's what we're proving half the time. It's not it, it's the sampling distribution. That's normal. Number 3, be specific in your language and vocabulary. So significant means something, it means like statistically significant, like my p-value is less than alpha. When something is skewed, that means that the graph is skewed. When something is biased, it has bias in it. So sometimes students just want to use these words to seem fancy or like try to add in fancy words because they want their answer to sound smart, but these are actually words that mean something, so don't use them unless it's appropriate to do so. Stratified versus blocking, we don't want to get those mixed up. Stratified is for observational study, blocking is for an experiment. So two different things. We stratify for an observational study, but we block for an experiment. They virtually do the same thing, but just one for each. Precise versus accurate, you don't see that too much. And then population distribution versus sampling distribution versus a sample distribution. So just make sure, are they talking about the population? Are they talking about a sampling distribution? Or is it just a sample? Use appropriate notation. So our symbols, whether it's a statistic or a parameter. Remember, all hypotheses have parameters with them. Be sure to define them. That's what I talked about earlier. So not just calculator input, not just normal CDF, say that it's normal with the mean standard deviation, not just binom PDF, say it's binomial with this number of trials. And if you had binom PDF 8.25, you would say it's binomial. You would have 8 trials. Your probability would be 0.2. My X would be 5. So you're listing out everything on top of what you put in the calculator. Z versus T. Remember, Z is proportions. T is means. Always. Prepare your workspace. So this year is going to look a little bit different. Some of you already started the process of taking AP tests, and I think most of you will have taken an AP test before you get to mine. But we already printed out the formula sheet, so you have that. Have your, it should say your computer, have your computer charged and your calculator ready. Everything should be charged. Calculator, phone, computer, plugged in, ready to go. And go into a place where it's quiet, where you normally study. Could be in your room or something, but you shouldn't have any distractions. Manage your time. We're going to log in 30 minutes early. That's at 12:30. We've already practiced the timing for the 2 free responses. And don't spend too much time on one part. It's possible to still make a 5 and not even answer one of the parts at all. So don't spend too much time on it. Answer the stuff that you do know first. And then just make sure that you're starting to upload whenever it's 5 minutes before, because there was a person yesterday in the calc exam that didn't get their question uploaded. So they just didn't get any credit for it, even though they finished it. Don't leave anything blank. There's no penalty for guessing. So write what you think is good. If you're stuck on one part and need the answer for the next part, like if it says based on part A, you didn't get A, just make up an answer that seems right and then use it for part B. You could still get full credit. Know the formula sheet, you should already know that. We did the video together. Know your inference, which we have the charts and all of that. Means or proportions, 1 or 2 sample. Confidence interval significance test, paired versus 2 sample. So just be comfortable with that. That might be something you want to keep going through as you're studying in the next week. And then be confident, be ready. We already did a practice test. You've done all the work. I feel really good about it. I heard the calculus exam wasn't anything too difficult, so that's just kind of what I'm basing it off of. It was things that everybody knew and were prepared for. It's what we've learned all year, so we've already done all the hard work. These are just the 5 steps that the AP test mentions to have ready before you take the exam. Make sure you have your e-ticket and your exam checklist. We're going to check in 30 minutes early. And make sure at least once you've tried to upload something on the exam demo. No matter if it was for this class or something else, just that you've done it before. This is what we have just kind of predicted, or what I've seen amongst the community. I think that free response question 1 will have 5 or 6 parts, but on the AP Calc test yesterday, the first question had 8 parts, so I don't know. And then the second question will have 4 or 5. They're only going to cover units 1 through 7. I think 1 question will be about means and 1 will be about proportions. And then 1 will have a confidence interval, 1 will be a test, and then 1 will be 1 sample, 1 will be 2. That just kind of covers everything that we've done up until this point. Could ask you what topic you want to see on the AP test this year. Probably cussing or something like that. Something easy. And then this is the last part that I wanted to go through, is just from the AP website, making sure as I went through and looked over the practice exam, overall they were good. The only things I still saw was just some people's writing is still too light and the flash is not helping, so just maybe practice a few times. Also, some of you took a picture and didn't have like a blank workspace, like there were your notes underneath your paper. There should be nothing underneath that. So use a white paper, lined or unlined. Some of you, like I preferred it to just be a piece of printer paper. It was actually pretty nice. Or graph paper or notebook paper, that's fine. Standard size, use a dark pencil or pen. And you can use 5 uploads per question. I don't think you'll take more than 5 pages. What to have on the exam day, make sure that you use Chrome for the user or the browser. Your device, you should have your laptop, your calculator, and your phone with you, because you're going to send the picture from your phone to your laptop. Here's something, Brianna, I know you asked me about that, Googling and stuff last, I guess on Monday, and they actually came out with this, which I found was interesting. It says, internet searches will waste your time and put you at risk of an exam violation. So if you copy and paste from a website or social media or some online forum, then they will cancel your scores because they'll say it's plagiarism. So they're strongly suggesting that you don't Google anything, and it's a waste of time. The more time you spend searching the web, the less time you spend answering exam questions. So the 5 things above are the things that they say you can use. Class notes, textbook, previous assignments, calculators. I guess if you have shared study notes like on a Quizlet or something, you need to download it to your own computer so you're not sharing it with someone else at the same time. Because I guess, I don't know if they could figure that out, but maybe they could. No idea. You should have all gotten your AP ID and a list of exams you're registered for. I'm not sure if your AP ID changes with every test, but they did say they would. Okay, I didn't think so. But they will email you your AP ID 2 days before your exam and your e-ticket for that particular exam. So you should be getting that on May 20th. So do not delete it. This is just the process of what the timing looks like. We'll log in at 12:30. You'll do the whole check-in thing. 30 minutes for question 1, 20 minutes for question 2. Your testing environment. I know some people have internet issues, and some people had internet issues, I think, on the calculus exam yesterday. So just make sure, like in your house, you tell people that you're living with to either not be on the internet or be minimal. Don't be watching Netflix or something while you're taking the test. Try to be in a room by yourself because you really are on a time constraint. but anything that's using high bandwidth could potentially mess up your uploading. And you don't want to do the entire problem, get to 5 minutes left, and then you can't upload your problem. It automatically moves to the next one. So you just want to make sure your internet is working and functioning that day. Here's an example of what is a good paper. You'll notice like in the top right-hand corner is the number page. I don't anticipate y'all taking more than 2 pages per question, but if you do, you do have to number them no matter what, even if you use 1 page. In the top left-hand corner is your AP ID and then your initials. What I would do is before you even, like maybe the day before or the morning of, in fact, the morning of, we'll probably do this together. I'm gonna have you guys fill out your paper so it's already ready. You're not wasting any time with that. And the bottom left-hand corner, that's what the attachment of photos looks like. They must be a JPEG, no HEIC, but I noticed everyone did well with that on the AP practice exam. None of the wrong forms. And you can upload multiple files and then you have to hit submit. Just a couple notes, write on one side of the paper, don't write on both sides. Pen or dark pencil, and a picture of the entire piece of paper. So nothing should be behind the paper unless it's another blank piece of paper, but no notes behind it or anything like that. What could go wrong during the test? I've heard like it's kicked people out, just heard that, but you can log back in, but they're just saying don't refresh your browser or go back whenever you're on the test. But it doesn't, you do waste a little time if it crashes or it kicks you out, but you can still log back in and it'll just keep up the same timer you had before. So overall, good luck. We've had a good year together. I'm sad that it ended this way and it's been crazy, but you guys have done awesome. And know that I'm rooting for you guys. And I think y'all are gonna do great. I really do think it's gonna go well. I think you guys are more prepared than you can imagine. So overall, let me stop this share. Overall, I think you guys are ready. Do y'all have any questions for me? Okay. Well, good luck with your AP test this week. We will check in on Friday of next week, just in the morning, go through some last minute things, and then you guys will be ready for your test. I hope y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McHenry. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.